Part 1. The Arrival. The lighthouse stood like a pale finger against the bruised sky, pointing toward heaven as if in accusation. Maya saw it first through the rain-streaked window of the bus, rising from the rocky coastline with a kind of desperate beauty that made her chest ache. She pressed her palm against the cold glass, leaving a print that faded almost immediately. "Last stop," the driver called, his voice carrying the weary tone of a man who'd made this journey too many times. Beacon's End. Beacon's End. Even the name felt like a warning. Maya gathered her single duffel bag and stepped into the rain. The bus pulled away immediately, as if afraid to linger, leaving her alone on a muddy road that seemed to lead nowhere but the sea. The wind carried salt and something else, something old and vast and patient. She'd come here to escape. That's what she told herself. Escape the city, the memories, the ghost of who she'd been before the accident. The online listing had been sparse. Lighthouse keeper needed. Room and board provided. Must be comfortable with solitude. Comfortable with solitude. Maya almost laughed. She'd been alone in a crowd of millions. How much worse could true isolation be? The path to the lighthouse wound through tall grass that whispered secrets in languages she couldn't quite understand. Seabirds circled overhead, their cries sharp and mournful. With each step, the tower grew larger, more imposing, until she stood at its base looking up at the lantern room that crowned it like a halo. The door was unlocked. "Hello," Maya called, pushing it open. Her voice echoed in the circular chamber, bouncing off stone walls that had stood for more than a century. "Mr. Chen? I'm Maya Winters, the new keeper." Silence answered her. Then, from somewhere above, the creak of footsteps on metal stairs. The man who descended was not what she expected. Thomas Chen was young, mid-30s perhaps, with silver-shot black hair and eyes that held the endless quality of the sea itself. He moved with deliberate care, as if each step required thought, and when he reached the bottom, he studied her with an intensity that made Maya want to look away. "You're earlier than expected," he said. His voice was soft, almost gentle, but carried an undercurrent of something Maya couldn't name. "The bus schedule changed. I hope that's okay. The sea doesn't care about schedules." He gestured toward the stairs. "I'll show you to your quarters. There isn't much time." Time for what? But Thomas had already started climbing, and Maya had no choice but to follow. The lighthouse interior was a study in beautiful decay. The walls bore the marks of a century of storms, cracks that looked like rivers on a map, patches of missing plaster that revealed older layers beneath. But someone had tried to make it a home. Books lined makeshift shelves. Oil paintings of the sea hung at intervals, each one capturing a different mood of the water. A small wood stove radiated warmth. Her room was on the third level, a curved space with a narrow bed, a desk, and a window that faced the endless ocean. It was sparse but clean, and the view took her breath away. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Thomas said from the doorway. "People think isolation is punishment. They don't understand that sometimes it's salvation." Maya turned to face him. "How long have you been the keeper?" 3 years. Before me, there was Eleanor. Before her, Marcus. Before him." He trailed off, a strange smile playing at his lips. "The lighthouse has always had a keeper. It needs one." "Needs one?" The listing said the light was automated. "It is. But automation isn't the same as care." Thomas crossed to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. "The light knows the difference. The sea knows. You'll understand soon." He left her then, his footsteps fading up toward the lantern room. Maya unpacked her meager belongings, trying to shake this strange feeling that had settled over her like a cold mist. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the glass with insistent fingers. That night, she learned the true voice of the lighthouse. Part 2. The Light. Maya woke to singing. At first, she thought she was dreaming. The voice was beautiful, a woman's voice, clear and haunting, singing a melody without words. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating through the very stones of the lighthouse. She sat up, heart pounding, and checked her phone. 3 a.m. The singing continued, rising and falling like waves. Maya grabbed her flashlight and stepped into the corridor. The singing was louder here, definitely coming from above. She climbed the spiral stairs, each step revealing another curve of the tower, another glimpse of the storm raging outside. The lantern room was locked, but light spilled from beneath the door. Not the steady beam of the automated lighthouse, but something that pulsed and shifted like a living thing. The singing was loudest here, so beautiful it hurt. You hear it. Maya spun to find Thomas sitting on the stairs below her, barely visible in the darkness. "What is it?" she whispered. "The lighthouse." He rose, climbing to join her. Every lighthouse keeper hears it eventually. Some on the first night, some never. The fact that you hear it now, that's significant. That's insane. Lighthouses don't sing, don't they? Thomas produced a key and unlocked the door. "Come, let me show you what you've really signed up for." The lantern room was a cathedral of light and glass. The Fresnel lens dominated the space, its precisely cut prisms casting rainbow fragments across every surface. But it was what surrounded the lens that made Maya gasp. The air was full of light, not just the beam of the lighthouse, but threads and ribbons of luminescence that wove through the space like living things. They moved with the singing, dancing to its rhythm, and as Maya watched, one thread drifted close enough to touch. She reached out instinctively. "Don't!" Thomas grabbed her wrist. "Not yet. You're not ready." The light thread recoiled, and for just a moment, Maya could have sworn she saw a face in it. A woman's face, beautiful and terrible and infinitely sad. "Were they?" she breathed. Thomas released her wrist and moved to the lens, placing his palm against its cold surface. The singing shifted, becoming almost conversational, as if the lighthouse itself was responding to his touch. "Stories," he said simply. "Every lighthouse is a keeper of stories. Every light that guided sailors home. Every ship that foundered despite the warning. The lighthouse remembers. These are the souls of those stories. The ones who were saved. The ones who weren't. The keepers who tended the light. They're all here, woven into the very fabric of this place." Maya should have run. Should have grabbed her bag and fled back to the city, to sanity, to the ordinary horrors of grief and guilt that at least made sense. But something in her recognized the truth of what Thomas said. She'd felt it the moment she saw the lighthouse. A pull, a calling, a sense of coming home to a place she'd never been. "Why me?" she asked. Thomas smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. The lighthouse chooses its keepers. It calls to those who understand loss, those who know what it means to be a beacon in the darkness, even when you're breaking apart yourself. He knew. Somehow, he knew about the accident, about Sarah, about the year Maya had spent trying to outrun the memory of her sister's last moments. The lighthouse knew. What does it want from me? To listen, to witness, to keep the light burning. Thomas gestured to the dancing threads of luminescence. These stories need a keeper. Without one, they fade. They're forgotten. And for them, being forgotten is worse than death ever was. Maya spent that night in the lantern room, listening as Thomas taught her the lighthouse's secrets. Each light thread was a story, and if you were quiet enough, patient enough, you could hear them. Not with your ears, with something deeper. Your bones, your blood, the hollow places in your heart where your own grief lived. She learned that Thomas had come here after losing his husband to the same sea the lighthouse watched over. She learned that Eleanor, the keeper before him, had been a mother who'd lost her child. Marcus had been a soldier who couldn't forget what he'd done in war. The lighthouse called to the broken ones. It always had. As dawn approached, the singing softened, and the light threads retreated into the lens. Thomas stood, stretching muscles stiff from hours of sitting. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tonight, I'll begin teaching you the real work." "What's the real work?" He paused at the door, silhouetted against the rising sun. "Setting them free." Part 3. The Stories. Maya's education began that evening, as the sun bled into the sea and the first stars appeared like pinpricks in a velvet curtain. Thomas led her to the lantern room, where the light threads were already beginning to emerge, called forth by the darkness. They moved with more purpose tonight, as if aware of Maya's presence, curious about this new potential keeper. The lighthouse doesn't just hold stories, Thomas explained, settling into the chair he'd positioned beneath the lens. It preserves them until someone can hear them properly. Really hear them, understand them, and then let them go. That's what Keeper does. We're not guards. We're witnesses, midwives to memory. He gestured to a light thread that hovered nearby, pulsing with a soft blue glow. Try with this one. It's gentle. A good first story. Maya approached cautiously, extending her hand as she'd seen Thomas do. The light thread hesitated, then wrapped around her fingers like silk. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming. She was no longer in the lighthouse. She was on a ship, a merchant vessel cutting through dark waters. The year was 1847. A young sailor named James stood at the rail, watching for the light. They'd been lost in fog for hours, and the captain's face was drawn with worry. There were rocks here. Everyone knew the stories of ships that had foundered. Then there, a beam of light, cutting through the mist. The lighthouse. Hope surged through James's chest. The captain adjusted course, and slowly, carefully, they navigated the treacherous waters to safety. James never forgot that light. Years later, when he was old and dying, surrounded by grandchildren he'd never have had if not for that beam cutting through the darkness, he thought of the lighthouse, sent his gratitude across the years. The vision faded, and Maya found herself back in the lantern room, tears streaming down her face. The light thread glowed brighter for a moment, then drifted toward the open window and dissolved into the night sky like a released breath. "You did it," Thomas said, wonder in his voice. "First try. It took me weeks to fully connect with my first story." Maya wiped her eyes. He was so grateful, so full of joy. "I felt it, all of it. That's the gift of the lighthouse. And the curse." Thomas's expression darkened. Not all the stories are like that one. Over the following weeks, Maya learned the truth of his words. Some stories were beautiful. Rescues, reunions, moments of profound human courage. A woman who'd waited 40 years for her husband to return from sea, and the night the lighthouse guided him home. A child who'd grown up in the keeper's cottage and spent her life painting the ocean, trying to capture its impossible colors. But others were drownings, shipwrecks, the desperate final thoughts of sailors who saw the lighthouse too late, keepers who'd gone mad from isolation, a murder hidden in the base of the tower for 100 years. Maya experienced them all. Each story left its mark, adding to the weight she carried. Some nights, she would stumble from the lantern room and vomit over the railing, overwhelmed by the intensity of what she'd witnessed. Other nights, she would simply weep, holding the grief of long-dead strangers as if it were her own. Thomas was always there, a steady presence. He showed her how to ground herself, how to separate her own emotions from the story she channeled, how to honor the darkness without being consumed by it. "Why doesn't the lighthouse just let them go on its own?" Maya asked one night, after releasing a particularly harrowing story of a father who drowned trying to save his son. "Why does it need us?" Thomas considered this. "I've thought about that a lot. I think the stories need someone alive to hear them. Someone who can understand both the joy and the sorrow of being human. The lighthouse holds them, but it can't truly comprehend them. That's our purpose. We translate between the living and the dead, between memory and release. And when they're all released, when there are no more stories, there are always more stories. Every night the light shines, it creates new ones. As long as there's an ocean and people who sail it, there will be stories for the lighthouse to hold." Maya understood then that this was not a temporary position. This was a calling that could last the rest of her life, if she let it. Part 4. Sarah's Light. 3 months into her service as keeper, Maya finally encountered the story she'd been dreading. She knew at the moment she saw the light thread. It burned with a familiar color, the exact shade of the scarf Sarah had been wearing the day she died. Maya's hands trembled as it approached her, and for a long moment, she considered fleeing. She could run down the stairs, out into the night, leave the lighthouse, and never return. But Thomas was watching, and more than that, Maya knew that running had never worked before. The past always caught up. She took a deep breath and opened herself to the story. But it wasn't Sarah's story. It was Maya's own. She saw herself from the outside, as if the lighthouse had been watching her all along. The accident played out in excruciating detail. The icy road, the moment of lost control, the terrible sound of metal crumpling. Sarah's last words, "It's okay. It's not your fault." But the story didn't end there. The lighthouse showed her what came after. The months of guilt, the self-destruction, the slow, agonizing journey toward this moment, standing in a tower at the edge of the world, try to make sense of her survival. And then, impossibly, Sarah was there. Not as a memory, but as a presence. The lighthouse had somehow preserved her, held her in the space between life and whatever came after, waiting for this moment. "Maya," Sarah's voice was wind and waves and light. "You've been carrying me like a burden, but I was never meant to be carried. I was meant to be released. I can't," Maya sobbed. "If I let you go, then you can finally start living again. That's what I want. That's what I've always wanted. The lighthouse called you here so you could learn how to do this, how to honor the dead by choosing life." The vision shifted, and Maya saw her sister as she'd been before the accident, vibrant, laughing, full of plans and dreams. She saw all the moments they'd shared, the stupid arguments and the deep talks, the ordinary texture of sisterhood. "Remember me like this," Sarah said. "Not as an ending, but as a whole story. A beautiful story that had its time and now deserves to rest." Maya wanted to hold on, wanted to keep Sarah close for just a little longer. But she understood now what the lighthouse had been teaching her all along. That love sometimes meant letting go. That keeping someone trapped in your grief wasn't loyalty. It was a kind of haunting that hurt them both. "I love you," Maya whispered. "I know, and I love you, which is why I'm asking you to set me free." Maya opened her hands, and the light that was Sarah, or her story, or her memory, or perhaps all three, rose up through the lantern room and out into the infinite sky. For just a moment, it illuminated the entire coastline, bright as a second sun, and then it was gone. Maya collapsed, and Thomas caught her. "I felt her go," she gasped. "She's really gone." "Yes," Thomas said gently. "And no, the stories we release don't disappear. They just stop being wounds and become what they were always meant to be, memories. Beautiful, terrible, precious memories that we can carry without being crushed by them." Maya cried then, not with the desperate, breaking sobs of grief, but with something cleaner, simpler. The tears of someone saying goodbye, really and truly, for the first time. When she finally quieted, the first light of dawn was painting the sea in shades of rose and gold. Part 5. The Storm. The storm arrived in late November, announced by a sky the color of a bruise and a wind that made the lighthouse sway. Maya had been keeper for 6 months now. Thomas had begun talking about leaving, about finding his next calling, now that he'd taught her everything she needed to know. The thought of being alone in the lighthouse should have terrified her, but instead, Maya felt ready. The tower had become home in a way nowhere else ever had. But first, the storm. It hit at sunset, transforming the ocean into a churning mass of slate-gray water and white foam. Rain lashed the lantern room windows with such force Maya feared the glass would shatter. The lighthouse shuddered with each gust, its old bones creaking in protest. "This is a big one," Thomas shouted over the wind's roar. They were both in the lantern room, checking the light, ensuring it was shining as bright as possible. "Ships will need us tonight." He was right. Through the sheets of rain, Maya caught glimpses of running lights on the water, a fishing boat trying desperately to make it back to harbor. She watched it pitch and roll, watched waves crash over its deck, and her heart clenched. The light threads were going wild, whipping through the lantern room in agitated swirls. They knew what was coming. They always knew. "I'm going to make sure everything's secure below," Thomas said. "Keep the lights steady. If anything changes..." A crack of thunder drowned out his words, and the lighthouse went dark. For a terrible moment, Maya stood in absolute blackness, hearing only the scream of the wind and the hammer of her heart. Then Thomas's flashlight clicked on, illuminating his pale face. "Backup generator," he said, already moving toward the stairs. "I'll get it started." He disappeared, leaving Maya alone with the storm and the darkness and the fishing boat that was now completely invisible in the night. The light threads began to glow brighter, as if trying to compensate for the extinguished beacon. Their light was softer, stranger, but it was light. Maya made a decision that she knew was probably crazy, but felt absolutely right. She opened herself to the threads, all of them at once. The flood of stories nearly destroyed her. Hundreds of voices, hundreds of moments, all clamoring for attention. She felt herself fragmenting, losing the boundaries of who Maya Winters was in the overwhelming tide of other lives, other deaths, other loves and losses. But beneath the chaos, she found a pattern, a purpose. The light threads weren't just preserving stories. They were creating a kind of map, a memory of every safe passage, every successful navigation through these dangerous waters. Generations of knowledge held in light. Maya stopped trying to hear individual stories and instead let herself become a conduit. She gathered all that accumulated wisdom, all those memories of survival, and shaped them into a beam of light that burst from the lantern room with a brilliance that rivaled the sun. The fishing boat's captain would later swear that he saw an angel, that when his instruments failed and his radio went dead and he was certain he was going to die, a light appeared that was like nothing he'd ever seen. It showed him the safe path through the rocks, guided him with such precision that he made it to harbor without a scratch. Maya knew none of this. She was lost in the stories, drowning in light and memory and the vast, patient love of the lighthouse itself. She might have stayed there forever, become another light thread, another story for the next keeper to release. Then Thomas's arms were around her, and he was pulling her back, shouting her name over and over until she remembered who she was. The generator kicked in, and the automated light resumed its steady rotation. Outside, the storm began to ease. Inside, Maya shook with exhaustion and something like exhilaration. "What did you do?" Thomas demanded, but there was awe in his voice, not anger. "I don't know," Maya admitted. "I just let them use me. Let the lighthouse use me. There was a boat, and I had to—" "I know. I saw." He helped her to the chair, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Maya, what you just did, I've been keeper for 3 years, and I never knew that was possible. You didn't just witness the stories. You became part of them. You became part of the lighthouse itself." Maya looked at the light threads, which had calmed now, drifting peacefully around the lens. They felt different, closer, as if that moment of complete surrender had forged a bond that went deeper than keeper and kept. "I felt it," she said softly. "The lighthouse. It's not just a building. It's alive, conscious. It's been watching over this coast for so long that it's developed its own kind of awareness. And it's lonely, Thomas. So lonely." He nodded slowly. "Yes, that's why it calls keepers. Why it holds on to stories. It's trying to understand what it means to be human, even though it never can be. And we're trying to understand what it means to be eternal, even though we never will. It's a beautiful bargain." They sat together in the lantern room as the storm faded and the stars emerged, one by one, like light threads against the darkness of the sky. Part 6. Thomas's Departure. Thomas left on a morning when the sea was as calm as glass, and the sun turned everything gold. Maya helped him carry his bags down the spiral stairs, each step an ending. They didn't speak much. There wasn't much left to say. She'd known this was coming. Had known from the beginning that keepers didn't stay forever. They served until they'd healed whatever brought them here, and then they moved on, making room for the next broken soul who needed the lighthouse's particular medicine. At the door, Thomas paused, looking up at the tower that had been his refuge for 3 years. "You'll be a better keeper than I ever was," he said. "That's not true." "It is. You have something I never did, a natural resonance with the lighthouse. When you opened yourself to the stories during the storm, you didn't just use the light. You became it. That's rare, Maya. Possibly unprecedented." He handed her an old leather journal, its pages filled with neat handwriting. This belonged to Eleanor. She got it from Marcus. He got it from someone before him. Every keeper adds to it. Observations, warnings, wisdom. Now it's yours. Maya took the journal with reverent hands. She could feel the weight of it, all those years of solitary watching condensed into paper and ink. "What will you do?" she asked. "Where will you go?" Thomas smiled, and it was free of the sorrow that had shadowed him when they first met. "I don't know. That's the beauty of it." For 3 years, every day was mapped out. Maintain the light, witness the stories, keep the tower. Now, anything is possible. He pulled her into a hug, and Maya held on tight. This man who'd become her teacher, her friend, her only human connection in 6 months of isolation. "Don't stay too long," he whispered. "The lighthouse can heal you, but it can also trap you. Know when it's time to leave." "How will I know?" "You'll know." He stepped back, shouldered his bag. "And when you're ready to go, the lighthouse will call your replacement. Trust that. Trust the process." Maya watched from the lighthouse door as Thomas walked down the path through the tall grass. He didn't look back. At the bend in the road, where the lighthouse vanished from view, he raised one hand in farewell, and then he was gone. The silence that followed was absolute. Maya climbed to the lantern room and stood at the window, looking out at the vast expanse of sea and sky. For the first time since arriving, she was truly alone. No other keeper to consult, to learn from, to share the weight of the stories with. Just her and the lighthouse and the endless watching. She should have felt afraid. Instead, she felt a deep, settling peace. That night, when the light threads emerged, they clustered around her like old friends. She released 3 stories: a young couple who'd been married in the lighthouse during a storm in 1923, a keeper who'd served for 40 years and loved every moment, and a child who'd been saved from drowning and grown up to become a marine biologist. Each release felt like breathing out, like making room for new breath, new life, new stories to come. The lighthouse hummed with contentment, and Maya hummed with it. Part 7. The New Keeper. Winter deepened, and Maya fell into the rhythm of solitary keeping. She woke with the dawn, made coffee in the small kitchen, spent her mornings maintaining the tower, cleaning the lens, checking the mechanism, repairing the endless small damages that storms and salt air inflicted. Afternoons were for the journal, reading the observations of keepers past, adding her own discoveries. But the nights belonged to the stories. She became expert at reading the light threads, understanding which stories were ready to be released and which needed more time. She learned that some souls weren't ready to let go, and forcing them would only cause pain. Patience was the keeper's greatest tool. She also discovered that she could call specific types of stories. If she held a particular emotion in her heart, joy, sorrow, courage, love, threads that resonated with that feeling would come to her. It made the work more intentional, more artful. One February night, while releasing a particularly beautiful story about a lighthouse keeper who'd proposed to his love beneath the beam, Maya felt the lighthouse shift. Not physically, this was deeper. A change in the very atmosphere of the place. Someone was coming. The knowledge settled over her with certainty. The lighthouse was calling a new keeper. Not to replace her, not yet, but to work alongside her. The tower wanted company. Or perhaps, Maya admitted to herself, she wanted company. 6 months of solitude had healed her, but humans weren't meant to be alone forever. 3 days later, she spotted a figure on the path. The woman was young, maybe 25, with dark skin and hair and long locks that the wind lifted like living things. She carried a backpack and moved with the hesitant gait of someone not quite sure they belonged but too curious to turn back. Maya met her at the door. "Hi," the woman said, her voice musical. "I know this is weird, but I saw an online posting about a lighthouse keeper position, except when I tried to find it again, it was gone, and I couldn't even remember what site I saw it on. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I just came. I'm sorry, this sounds insane." "It's not insane," Maya interrupted gently. "The lighthouse called you. I'm Maya. Come in." The woman, her name was Jasmine, followed Maya inside with wide eyes. She took in the circular chamber, the spiral stairs, the way light seemed to live in the very stones. "This place," Jasmine breathed. "It feels like coming home to somewhere I've never been." Maya smiled. She felt exactly the same way. Over tea, Jasmine's story emerged. She'd been a social worker, burning out from trying to save everyone, unable to save the one child who needed her most. A little boy, lost to a system that should have protected him. The guilt was eating her alive. The lighthouse holds stories, Maya said. Stories of people who lived and died, connected to the sea, to this coast, to the light itself. Being a keeper means witnessing those stories, honoring them, and then releasing them. It's hard work, soul work, but it heals you even as you heal the stories. How? Jasmine asked. By teaching you that bearing witness is enough. That you can't save everyone, but you can honor everyone. That remembering the dead, really remembering them, in all their complexity, is a form of love. Jasmine was quiet for a long moment. Can I stay? Can I learn? That's why the lighthouse called you. Part 8. Teaching and learning. Having another keeper in the lighthouse changed everything. The silence that had become comfortable for Maya was filled now with Jasmine's laughter, her questions, her music. She played guitar and sang songs that made the light threads dance. The tower that had been a hermitage became a home. Maya taught Jasmine everything Thomas had taught her, and in teaching, discovered depths she hadn't known existed. She learned that every keeper brought their own gift to the work. Thomas had been scholarly, approaching the stories like a researcher. Maya was intuitive, feeling her way through. Jasmine turned out to be a natural storyteller, able to translate the wordless communication of the light threads into narratives that made Maya cry. Listen, Jasmine would say, sitting cross-legged beneath the lens while a thread wove between her fingers. This is Sarah, not your Sarah, a different one. She was a lighthouse keeper's wife in 1889. She'd been a dancer before she married, and she missed it. Missed the stage, the applause, the freedom of movement. So every night, while her husband tended the light, she would dance on the gallery that circles the lantern room. She'd dance for the stars and the sea and the light itself. The thread would pulse and shimmer as Jasmine spoke, as if grateful to have its story told so beautifully. One night, there was a terrible storm. Her husband was in the lantern room, and Sarah was dancing, because dancing was how she prayed. A wave came, a rogue wave, massive and hungry, and it reached up and pulled her away. They never found her body. Jasmine's voice grew soft, but the lighthouse remembered. It held onto the moment of her dancing, the joy she'd felt in those final seconds when she was both completely herself and completely surrendered to something larger. And now, whenever there's a storm, keepers have reported seeing a woman dancing on the gallery. Not a ghost, a memory, a story the lighthouse loves too much to release. Maya felt the truth of it. Some stories were woven so deeply into the lighthouse that they'd become part of its very structure. Sarah the dancer was one of them. Her story didn't need releasing. It needed honoring. Can we see her? Maya asked. Jasmine grinned. Let's find out. They waited for the next storm, which came 2 weeks later. As the wind rose and the waves crashed, Maya and Jasmine went to the gallery, the narrow walkway that circled the lantern room outside, surrounded only by a low railing and the vast indifference of the sky. The wind nearly knocked them over. Rain lashed their faces. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely reckless. And there, in the lightning-illuminated darkness, they saw her. Sarah the dancer moved through the storm as if it was music. Her form was made of light and memory, translucent but undeniably present. She spun and leaped, her movements a conversation with the wind, and watching her, Maya understood something profound. Some stories didn't end. Some stories became eternal, woven into the fabric of a place, living on not as ghosts but as essence. Sarah the dancer hadn't been trapped by the lighthouse. She'd chosen to stay, because dancing in the storm brought her a joy that transcended death. Maya and Jasmine stood in the rain, bearing witness, until Sarah's dance reached its crescendo. She turned toward them, and for just a moment, her face was clear. She was smiling, purely, radiantly happy. Then she dissolved back into light and was gone. Thank you, Jasmine whispered to the storm. Thank you for showing us. The wind seemed gentle in response. Part 9. Maya's Test. Spring came to the coast, bringing calmer seas and a profusion of wildflowers that turned the cliff into a riot of color. Maya had been keeper for nearly a year now, and the lighthouse was preparing to test her. She didn't know this consciously, but she felt it, a building tension, a sense of gathering purpose. The light threads had grown more active, more insistent. Stories that had been quiescent for years were suddenly demanding release. The lighthouse itself seemed to pulse with anticipation. It began with dreams. Maya would fall asleep in her narrow bed and find herself walking through the lighthouse's history. She saw it being built, stone by stone, in 1872. Saw the first keeper light the lamp with hands that shook with the responsibility of it. Saw decades of faithful service, of lives saved and lives lost, of keepers who loved the tower and keepers who grew to hate it. She saw the lighthouse during wartime, its light extinguished so enemy ships couldn't use it for navigation. Saw the keeper of that era, a woman named Grace, nearly go mad from the guilt of being dark when ships needed guidance. Saw Grace finally relight the beacon despite orders, saving a lifeboat full of sailors, but earning herself a court-martial. In the dream, Maya stood beside Grace as she faced her tribunal. The lighthouse's duty is to the sea, Grace said, her voice unwavering. Not to politics, not to war. The sea doesn't care which side you're on. It will kill you just the same. I kept the light burning because that's what a keeper does. They imprisoned her for it. But every keeper who came after knew her story and knew she'd been right. Maya woke from these dreams exhausted, but understanding more each time. The lighthouse was showing her its soul, preparing her for something. That something came on the spring equinox. Maya and Jasmine were in the lantern room, releasing stories as they did every night. But tonight, the threads were behaving strangely. Instead of coming to them individually, they were gathering together, weaving into a pattern that Maya had never seen before. What's happening? Jasmine asked, alarmed. Maya reached out to touch the woven light, and the vision that struck her was like being hit by lightning. She saw the future. Multiple futures, branching possibilities, all centered on a single moment. A massive tanker, off course, and heading straight for the rocks. In some futures, it ran aground, spilling millions of gallons of oil that destroyed the coastline for generations. In others, it received warning in time and diverted. In still others, it sank, taking its crew with it, but sparing the coast. The lighthouse was showing her that the moment was coming. Soon, and the choice of which future became real would depend on the keeper. Maya gasped and pulled back, her heart racing. What did you see? Jasmine demanded. A test. The lighthouse's test. Maya moved to the window, scanning the dark ocean. Nothing yet, but soon. There's going to be a ship, a big one, in trouble. And what I do, will determine what happens to it. When? I don't know, but we need to be ready. They didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, in the dead hours before dawn, the radio crackled to life. Mayday, Mayday, this is the tanker Pacific Star. We've lost navigation, lost engines. Currents are pushing us toward shore. Request immediate assistance. Maya's blood ran cold. This was it. She and Jasmine raced to the lantern room. The light threads were going wild, showing her the ship's position, the current's direction, the location of the rocks. But they were also showing her something else, a safe path. Narrow, treacherous, requiring precise navigation, but possible. The question was, how could she communicate that path to the ship's captain? The radio crackled again. Pacific Star to Coast Guard. Our radar is down. We're blind. We need. Maya made a decision. She opened herself to the lighthouse completely, as she had during the storm. But this time, instead of letting it work through her, she joined with it, became it. Her consciousness expanded to fill the tower, to encompass the lens, to merge with the light itself. Through the lighthouse's eyes, she could see everything, the ship, the rocks, the safe passage. And she could control the light. Maya began to flash a pattern. Not Morse code, but something older, something she shouldn't have known but the lighthouse did. A language of light that sailors had understood for centuries, built into their bones by generations of watching for beacons. On the Pacific Star, the captain saw the light begin its strange flashing and felt, in his gut, that he should follow it. He couldn't have explained why, but he ordered the helm to turn, to trust the light, to follow its guidance even though every instrument they had was dead. For 2 hours, Maya guided the ship through the darkness. She felt every meter of its progress, every near miss with rocks that would have torn its hull open. Jasmine stood by, ready to catch her if she fell, but Maya was beyond falling. She was the lighthouse. The lighthouse was her. When the Pacific Star finally reached safe waters and dropped anchor, Maya's consciousness snapped back into her body. She collapsed, and this time Jasmine did catch her. "You did it," Jasmine said, tears streaming down her face. "You saved them. You saved the coast." Maya could only nod, too exhausted for words. The Coast Guard arrived at dawn, full of questions about the strange light pattern that had guided the ship. Maya gave vague answers about experimental signals, and they seemed satisfied. They didn't need to know the truth, that the lighthouse itself had reached out and saved them. After they left, Maya climbed back to the lantern room. The light threads were calm now, drifting peacefully. One separated from the others and came to her. When she touched it, she saw Grace, the keeper who'd been imprisoned for keeping the light burning during war. Grace smiled at her across the decades. "Well done." Her voice seemed to say, "You understood. The lighthouse's duty is to the sea." The thread dissolved, finally released after more than 80 years. Maya had passed the test. Part 10, The Choice. Summer bloomed across the coast, and with it came tourists, drawn by the lighthouse's lonely beauty. The path that had been empty when Maya first arrived now saw a steady trickle of hikers and photographers. The lighthouse didn't mind. It had always been meant to be seen, to guide and welcome. But the attention brought complications. A developer appeared one August morning, full of plans to turn the lighthouse into a boutique hotel. "Think of it," he said, spreading blueprints across their small table. "Luxury accommodations with an authentic maritime feel. We'd keep the light operational, of course, but the interior would be completely renovated. You could stay on as, I don't know, historical consultants." Maya listened to him talk, watched Jasmine's face grow paler, and felt the lighthouse's distress like a physical pain. "No," she said quietly. "No, but you haven't even heard about the compensation package." "No," Maya repeated, more firmly. "The lighthouse isn't for sale. It's not a commodity. It's a keeper of stories, a guardian of the coast. You can't turn that into a hotel." The developer's face hardened. "You don't actually own this property, Ms. Winters. It's owned by the state, and the state is very interested in our proposal." After he left, Maya and Jasmine sat in stunned silence. "Can it really do that?" Jasmine asked. "Just take the lighthouse from us?" "I don't know." Maya pulled out the keeper's journal, flipping through its pages. Surely someone had faced this before. Surely there was wisdom here about how to protect the tower. She found it in Eleanor's section. The former keeper had written, "Remember, the lighthouse chooses. If it wants to remain free, it will find a way. Our job is to listen and trust." That night, Maya climbed to the lantern room and placed her hands on the lens. "I know you can hear me," she said to the lighthouse. "I know you're aware. They want to take you from us, turn you into something you're not. I'll fight them if I can, but I'm just one person. If you want to remain free, you're going to have to help." The light threads swirled, and Maya felt a response that wasn't quite words, but was clear nonetheless. Trust. Wait. Watch. Over the following weeks, strange things began to happen. Investors who'd been interested in the hotel project suddenly pulled out, citing bad feelings about the location. The developer's car broke down on the Lighthouse Road 3 times. Surveyors reported equipment malfunctions and a pervasive sense of unease that made it hard to work. And then the story started. Tourists who visited the lighthouse began reporting experiences. They'd see lights where there shouldn't be lights, hear singing in the wind, feel presences that weren't quite ghosts but weren't quite imagination either. One woman, a travel blogger with a massive following, wrote a viral post about her spiritual awakening at the lighthouse, how she'd felt connected to something ancient and important and utterly sacred. The lighthouse was defending itself by revealing itself. Not completely, it was too canny for that, but enough to make people feel that this place was special, that it needed protection. Public opinion shifted. Petitions circulated. Environmental groups got involved, arguing that the lighthouse and its surrounding land were ecologically sensitive and should be preserved. The state, facing pressure from multiple directions, quietly shelved the hotel project. Maya watched it all unfold with a mixture of relief and awe. The lighthouse had saved itself, and in doing so, it had taught her another lesson. Sometimes the best way to fight was simply to be so undeniably yourself that no one could mistake you for anything else. But the episode also made Maya think about her future. How long would she stay? Thomas had warned her not to remain too long, but what did that mean? How did you know when it was time to leave a place that had become so thoroughly home? She was still pondering this when Jasmine found her on the gallery one September evening, watching the sunset paint the ocean in impossible colors. "I'm leaving," Jasmine said without preamble. Maya turned, surprised. "What? Why?" "Because I'm healed." Jasmine smiled, and it was radiant. "I came here broken, unable to forgive myself for failing that little boy. But the lighthouse taught me that witnessing is enough, that I can honor the dead without being destroyed by them. I'm ready to go back to social work, ready to try again, knowing I'll fail sometimes, but that failure doesn't make the trying worthless." Maya felt tears sting her eyes. "I'm going to miss you. I'll miss you too. But this is how it works, right? We come here to heal, and then we leave to make room for the next person who needs healing. You taught me that." "Did I?" "You did. Just by being what you are, a keeper who understands that this is a way station, not a destination." After Jasmine left, the lighthouse felt emptier than it had even during Maya's months of solitude. She found herself thinking about what came next, not just who would replace Jasmine, but whether Maya herself should start considering her own departure. The thought brought a sharp pang of loss, but it also brought something else, curiosity. What would she do if she left? Where'd she go? Who would she become? This version of herself that the lighthouse had helped create. Part 11, the final story. Winter returned, and with it, the deepest cold Maya had ever experienced at the lighthouse. Snow fell for the first time in years, transforming the coast into something from a fairy tale. The lighthouse stood like a candle in the whiteness, its light seeming warmer somehow, more welcoming. Maya was alone again. The lighthouse hadn't called a replacement for Jasmine yet, and Maya suspected she knew why. There was something unfinished, something the tower needed her to complete before she could move on. The answer came on the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. Maya was in the lantern room, releasing stories as she did every night. But tonight, the light threads were all gathering toward one spot, weaving together into a pattern that made her breath catch. They were forming a door. Not a physical door, something else. A threshold, a passage into the very heart of the lighthouse's memory. Maya approached cautiously. Every instinct told her that stepping through this doorway would change everything. But she'd come too far to turn back now. She stepped through. The vision that unfolded was unlike anything she'd experienced before. She was seeing through the lighthouse's eyes, experiencing its entire history in a single, overwhelming moment. She felt the hands of its builders, felt the first light kindle in its lamp, felt every keeper who'd ever served, every ship it had guided, every soul it had saved or failed to save. She understood then what the lighthouse truly was. It wasn't just a building or even a conscious entity. It was a collective, a gathering of every person who'd ever connected with it, their essence preserved and merged into something greater than the sum of its parts. Every keeper became part of the lighthouse. They didn't die or leave completely. They wove themselves into its fabric, adding their wisdom and experience to its growing consciousness. Thomas was here, Eleanor, Marcus, Grace, all the keepers stretching back to the first, and they were all trying to tell her something. "It's time," they seemed to say. "Time to choose." "Choose what?" Maya asked the assembled presences. "Whether to stay or go." whether to become part of us, permanent and eternal, or to take what you've learned and return to the world. Maya understood the weight of this choice. If she stayed, truly stayed, merged with the lighthouse as these others had, she would become something more than human, but also something less. She would be eternal but bound to this place forever. She would witness endless stories but never create new ones of her own. It was tempting. God, it was tempting to never have to face uncertainty again, to always know her purpose, to be part of something so much larger than herself. But Sarah's voice echoed in her memory. Remember me like this. Not as an ending, but as a whole story. A beautiful story that had its time and now deserves to rest. Maya had learned to release the dead. Now she had to learn to release herself. I can't stay, she said to the assembled keepers. I love this place. It saved me. But I'm not meant to be eternal. I'm meant to be human, with all the messiness and uncertainty and beauty that comes with that. She felt their acceptance, their understanding, and something more, their pride. Then take this, they said, and Maya felt something flow into her. A gift, a piece of the lighthouse that she could carry with her wherever she went. Not enough to bind her, but enough to remember, enough to stay connected. The vision faded, and Maya found herself back in the lantern room, tears streaming down her face. She knew what she had to do. Part 12, The Leaving. Maya spent her last weeks at the lighthouse preparing for departure. She updated the keeper's journal with everything she'd learned. She released the remaining stories that were ready to go, and she waited for her replacement to arrive. The woman who came was older than Maya expected, 50 perhaps, with gray-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too much. Her name was Rachel, and she was a former hospice nurse, exhausted from years of watching people die. I need to learn how to witness without burning out, Rachel said simply. Someone told me about this place. Said it might help. Maya smiled. It will. Let me show you how. She taught Rachel everything. The mechanics of maintaining the light, the art of connecting with the stories, the importance of knowing when to hold on and when to let go. Rachel learned quickly, bringing her own gifts to the work. She had a healer's touch, a way of soothing even the most troubled stories. On Maya's last night, she and Rachel sat together in the lantern room, surrounded by dancing light threads. Are you afraid? Rachel asked. Of leaving? Terrified, Maya admitted. This place has been my whole world for almost 2 years. I don't know who I am outside of it anymore. But you're going anyway. Yes, because staying would be the easy choice. And I think I've learned that the right choice and the easy choice are rarely the same thing. Rachel nodded. What will you do? Maya had been thinking about this. I want to work with grief counseling. Help people who've lost someone the way I lost Sarah. The lighthouse taught me that stories need witnesses. I want to be that for people. Someone who can hear their grief without trying to fix it. Someone who can honor it. You'll be good at that. As dawn approached, Maya walked through the lighthouse one final time. She touched the walls that had sheltered her, looked out the windows that had framed her healing, climbed the stairs that had carried her between earth and sky. In the lantern room, she placed her hand on the lens one last time. Thank you, she whispered, for calling me, for teaching me, for letting me go. The lighthouse hummed, and Maya felt its love wash over her. Not possessive love, but the kind that wants what's best for the beloved, even if it means separation. She felt the presence of all the keepers who'd become part of the lighthouse. They were blessing her, releasing her, sending her back into the world with their wisdom woven into her bones. Maya descended the stairs, shouldered her bag, and stepped out into the morning. Rachel stood at the door. Will you come back? Maybe. Someday. But not as a keeper. As what then? Maya smiled. As someone who's learned to carry light without being consumed by it. As someone who knows that every ending is also a beginning. She walked down the path through the tall grass, and this time, she did look back. The lighthouse stood against the morning sky, eternal and patient, already turning its attention to its new keeper. Maya carried a piece of it with her, that gift the collective keepers had given her. She could feel it warm in her chest like a second heartbeat. It meant she would always be connected to the lighthouse, would always be able to sense the stories it held and the keepers who served it. But it also meant she could be fully in the world again. She could love without fear of loss, knowing that every story, no matter how it ends, deserves to be witnessed and honored and finally, gently released. At the bend in the road where the lighthouse vanished from view, Maya paused. She raised one hand in farewell, just as Thomas had done. Then she turned toward the future and began to walk. Epilogue, 5 years later. Maya sat across from the woman whose daughter had died 6 months ago, listening as she spoke about the unbearable weight of still being here when her child wasn't. Everyone says it gets easier, the woman said, her voice breaking. But it doesn't. It just gets different. And I don't know if I can carry this for the rest of my life. Maya reached across the space between them, not to touch, but to offer presence. Connection. Witness. You don't have to carry it alone, she said gently. And you don't have to carry it the same way forever. Grief is like the ocean. It has tides. Sometimes it overwhelms you. Sometimes it recedes. But it's always there, and that's okay. The goal isn't to get rid of it. The goal is to learn to swim in it. The woman looked up, and Maya saw recognition in her eyes. The recognition of someone who understands, not theoretically, but experientially. You've lost someone, the woman said. It wasn't a question. My sister. 7 years ago. I blamed myself. I ran from it. And then I found a place that taught me how to hold grief without being destroyed by it. What place? Maya smiled, feeling the warm pulse of a lighthouse's gift in her chest. A lighthouse. At the edge of the world. It taught me that every story deserves a witness. That bearing witness is a form of love. And that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply stay present with the pain, yours and others. After the session, Maya stood at her office window, looking out at the city. She'd built a good life here, a practice helping people navigate grief, an apartment that felt like home, friends who knew her story and loved her anyway. But some nights, she still dreamed of the lighthouse. She would wake with the sound of waves in her ears and the taste of salt on her lips. And she would feel the pull, not to return permanently, but to visit, to check in, to see how Rachel was doing and meet whoever had replaced her. Maya pulled out her phone and bought a bus ticket. 3 days later, she stood on the familiar muddy road, looking up at the lighthouse rising against the sky. It looked exactly the same, eternal, patient waiting. But she was different, changed, healed. Rachel met her at the door, older now, with more silver in her hair, but a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Maya. She pulled her into a hug. I felt you coming. The lighthouse told me. They climbed to the lantern room, where a young man was carefully cleaning the lens. Rachel's student, preparing to become a keeper in his own right. This is David, Rachel said. David, this is Maya, one of the legendary keepers. Maya laughed. Legendary is a strong word. You guided a tanker through rocks in the dark, Rachel said. You merged with the lighthouse. You're definitely legendary. That night, the three of them sat together in the lantern room, surrounded by light threads. Maya opened herself to them as she once had, and they came to her like old friends. She released 3 stories, simple ones, gentle ones, stories of love and survival and the ordinary courage of being human. When it was done, Rachel and David went down to prepare dinner, but Maya lingered. She placed her hand on the lens and felt the presence of the collective keepers. I'm happy, she told them. I'm doing good work. I'm healing people. But I wanted you to know I haven't forgotten. I carry you with me. Every single day. She felt their approval, their joy, and she felt them tell her something she needed to hear. You are exactly where you're meant to be. And we are exactly where we're meant to be. And the lighthouse will keep calling those who need it, keep holding their stories, keep shining its light. This is the way of things. This is the beautiful bargain. Maya stayed for 3 days, helping with the work, sharing stories with Rachel and David, remembering what it felt like to be a keeper. But on the morning of the 4th day, she said goodbye again. This time, the leaving didn't hurt. She understood now that she would always be connected to this place. That once you've been a keeper, you carry the lighthouse in your heart forever. As she walked down the path, she heard singing, that wordless melody that had greeted her on her first night. But now she understood what it was saying. It was saying, thank you. Thank you for witnessing us. Thank you for honoring our stories. Thank you for learning to hold light without being consumed by it. It was saying, go now, live, create new stories. And when your time comes, your story will join ours, and it will be beautiful. Maya walked back into the world, carrying light, bearing witness, honoring the beautiful, terrible, precious stories that make us human. And far behind her, the lighthouse kept turning, kept shining, kept calling to the next broken soul who needed its particular magic. The light always calls. The keepers always come. And the stories never end. They just change who's telling them. The end.